So the college football coaching carousel is spinning at an alarming rate, and there's no end in sight. We're going into week 9, another pretty good week of college football, but can it compare to what last Saturday was? I don't know if it can. We got a lot of good matchups, and more importantly, I think we could possibly have some more coaching changes depending on what happens this Saturday. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to talk about. It's college football, y'all. My name's Brandon Taylor. As always, thank you for joining us. However, you're joining me on this podcast, whether that's the video format, the audio version on YouTube, or the audio version on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. I appreciate that. So, what developments have we had since the last time we spoke? Well, we spoke just the other day about Billy Napier and his firing at Florida and kind of the infant stages of what is Florida's head coaching search. Now, we are still in the middle of the season. We're about 2/3 of the way through. There's a lot of football to be played. The college football playoff rankings have not even came out yet. So there's still a lot to happen. And for a team, a place like Florida, a school like Florida, a program like Florida, you're not going to get one of these guys. You're not going to get anybody that's probably, how do I put this? You're going after head coaches that are in the Power Four, and preferably coaches that are doing well in the Power Four. So you're not going to pick up a guy that's been fired from another place. James Franklin, I don't think he's going to be a candidate here. Of course, I'm pretty sure he's already said no, and if he doesn't, he will. There's a lot of speculation on the internet, so don't always read what you believe, whether that's what you see on Twitter or YouTube, any of the other platforms. You can't believe everything you see. There's a lot of smack talk between Florida fans and Ole Miss fans, for example, and a lot of fun and a lot of really toxic things on there as well. But nevertheless, what Florida's going to be going after is probably somebody that's still in the hunt for the playoff this season, that's still in mid-season form. This is going to be a long month and a half, maybe month and a couple weeks for Florida. It could be a long 2 or 3 months, because the potential candidates, and if you look at like Pete Thamel for ESPN or certain other writers from other news and sports sources have put out there, the different possible coaches. A lot of those guys could be making runs, deep into the postseason. Maybe not. I know one in particular that we'll talk about later is hoping to make a deep playoff run, and you got some others that could as well. That is a continuing situation. It's a very fluid situation down there, and that's what we talked about on the last episode. If you want my full breakdown, my full kind of response to that, what happened at Florida, and my reaction to that, go back to the last episode that I uploaded just a couple of days ago, earlier in the week. I believe that was Monday when that came out. Or was it Tuesday? If you go in there and look. I think I recorded on Monday, came out on Tuesday. Nevertheless, it's a lot to keep a track around here. So anyway, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, we got some good games this weekend, this Saturday, and I want to start with what I'm calling Hugh Freeze's final straw. And you'll see a theme in this episode that I'm talking about these games, but I'm also going to talk about the coaching situation, since there's so much focus on this coaching carousel and everything that's happening in college football right now. I want to kind of dig into that as well, and how these coaches are, what their seat is, what kind of gauging their job security currently, and depending on what happens this Saturday. And some of this is going to be speculation. Some of this is going to be opinions that probably 98% of everybody else will share. I don't think anything I'm going to say is controversial. I'm not here for any kind of like clickbait. I'm just going to tell you my opinion. If my opinion turns out to be like clickbaity, then I apologize. But I'm trying to be as genuine as I can. And Hugh Freeze's final straw is what I've got as the title of this game. Auburn traveling to Fayetteville to play Bobby Petrino's interim Bobby Petrino's Arkansas Razorbacks, who are currently a 2.5-point favorite in this game. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Arkansas. Taylon Green. I am impressed by Taylon Green. And hear me out for a second. Taylon Green, I believe he is the best SEC quarterback who is on a bad team. Okay? Do you understand what I'm saying here? Listen one more time. Taylon Green is the best SEC quarterback who is on a bad team. So if you take all the, what would you would say, quote unquote, bad teams in the Southeastern Conference, line all those quarterbacks up, I think Taylon Green is the best quarterback out of that pool of quarterbacks. Pretty good. And if you just want to look at his stats, if you're really an analytical and statistical person, he's went 138 of 221, a 62.4% completion percentage, 1,910 yards, 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Now, you have to consider he's on Arkansas. They're not a great team. These are things you have to factor. How would Taylon Green play if he was on, if he was, let's just say, at like Tennessee, for example, under Josh Heupel? Even somewhere like Auburn under Hugh Freeze in place of, Peyton Thorne. Did I say Peyton Thorne? Jackson Arnold. What's the difference, right? That was a joke, and it wasn't a good joke. I am no comedian. Jackson Arnold, Peyton Thorne, Taylon Green can make a difference at Auburn. He definitely could. But I see this as one of Arkansas's best chances to get an SEC win. They're at home versus Mississippi State next week, November 1st. This right here, I really want to say that this may be a better chance than next week at State, because Mississippi State, they have Texas this week. They have Texas on Saturday. And I think if Jeff Lebby's going to make some changes, and I think he's going to sort some things out, maybe make a change at quarterback, State could do a number to Texas. And I think whatever they do, even if they lose to Texas, their confidence is going to be built up. And then next week, when they have traveled to Fayetteville, they're going to give the Razorbacks heck. I firmly believe that. So I think, honestly, especially in a point where Hugh Freeze is down and you really want to kick him. You want to kick a man. Do you want to kick a man when he's down? Sometimes you have no choice. And I just don't see, if we compare the stats here, because I said Taylon Green's the best quarterback on a bad team. Jackson Arnold, 124 of 195 and 5 touchdowns. 1,190 yards. Again, if you're just a statistical guy, that is terrible. 689 yards versus conference opponents. 1 touchdown versus conference opponents. Now, a lot of that falls on Hugh Freeze. Actually, it all falls on Hugh Freeze because this was his guy, just like Peyton Thorne was his guy. And yet again, Hugh Freeze is failing because, he tries to be the offensive coordinator and the head coach. And just like Billy Napier, it's going to be to the detriment of Hugh Freeze as well. And ultimately, I think this game is like the straw that's going to break the camel's back. And I actually do have Arkansas winning this game. I will take Arkansas minus 2.5. I think they can win by a touchdown. I don't know that it will be any more than a touchdown. It could be one of those weird 4-point games or something like that. But I see Arkansas getting it together, putting together just enough there at home to beat Auburn. And you know what that means. So if we just want to talk about Hugh Freeze for a minute. Before the season, I predicted that Auburn, they have to win 8 games or more for Hugh Freeze to keep his job for another year. And then he would be on the hottest of hot seats next season, and the cycle would continue then. He was on the hottest of hot seats on my list this season anyway. It's looking grim. The Tigers have to win out in order to win those 8 games. Now, this is a Razorback team that that came very close to beating Tennessee, and they came very close to beating Texas A&M. Remember, Sam Pittman's gone. Interim head coach Bobby Petrino is leading this team. Now, whether I think there was some tomfoolery that took place there by Bobby Petrino himself to kind of force his way into like some kind of a coup to force himself into the head coaching position again. Look, hey, I don't know. Look, it's just, speculation. Allegedly, there was a little bit of some tomfoolery going on there that allowed Bobby Petrino to end up as head coach for the Arkansas Razorbacks again. So if Auburn doesn't find a way to win here, they still have to, excuse me, let me start over. Auburn, regardless if they win or lose, even if they win, they still have to play Vanderbilt team. A Vanderbilt team that is absolutely on fire, and an unstoppable Alabama team in the Iron Bowl at the end of the season. And it's kind of the inevitable, and I think we all could have predicted this because, like I said, you were giving them a tough task to complete, and that's winning the 8 games. Freeze is out of a job, and I would put money on that. If Auburn happens to beat Arkansas on Saturday, the inevitable could very well be delayed. It's going to happen. He's going to get fired. They win on Saturday at, kickoff 12:45 p.m., 11:45 a.m. there on the SEC network. At about 3:30, 11, 12, 1, 2, about 3 o'clock Central Time when that game finishes. That will determine the fate for Hugh Freeze. If they win and they look pretty decent, I think he may be around for a couple more weeks. But, I say that because if it's not now, it's going to be after the Vanderbilt game because they have a bye week after the Vanderbilt game. But does it benefit athletic director John Cohen to fire Hugh Freeze now rather than later, like I said, after that Vanderbilt game? Well, it's tough because you're falling into you're falling into the spot where you're competing, you're firing your coach, but you're competing with other places, big jobs, bigger jobs than yours, that I would argue, that have already fired their coaches. Notably, that's Penn State and Florida. Now, some would argue that Auburn is a better job than Florida. I don't think you can say Auburn is a better job than Penn State, however. I think you can make the argument of Florida being better than Penn State. I don't know if you can make the argument of Auburn being better than Penn State. That makes sense? Good. But it's all subjective. I personally think both of those jobs should be, higher on the totem pole than that Penn State position, because that Penn State position is not going to be for everybody. But I would say that the Florida job is probably better than Auburn. Right now, I think so. But I think both of those jobs are down the list, and there's several jobs that are better than those at the current time. This all gets very confusing, and when you go down the rabbit hole of what job is a better job, what job's not a better job, why is this job better than that one? It's better. It's not good now, but could it be good in a couple of years with insert head coach? And is this job good because of who's there, or is it good because it's just good? It's just the resources and everything are there. There will always be there regardless of who is wearing the headset. A lot of these things are subjective. But the fact is, for John Cohen, these higher profile jobs are really going to mess up it's not going to be a clean carousel. It's not going to be a clean ride for Auburn. And we're talking about, pulling out of a pool of the good thing, though. The good thing that can come out of this for Auburn is, you keep losing, you don't go to a bowl game, your season's going to end after the Iron Bowl, so you can get right to it. The worst thing that could happen is for some miracle to happen and you have to go to a bowl game. Because then you got to sign an interim head coach and all that mumbo jumbo. And that's kind of some brain power that John Cohen's going to have to take, to decide what he's going to do there. Meanwhile, Florida's going to be looking for their coach. Penn State's going to be getting theirs, and all the other high profile jobs and all the group of 6 jobs that have came open. They're all going to be getting their guy. But it goes beyond just these schools that have fired their coaches, and there is going to be more. What about the speculation down there in Baton Rouge with Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers? If we look back on LSU's track record, they are not afraid to fire a coach, even, if there's been recent success, recent national championships. Brian Kelly has some success. No national titles there at LSU. He's had very special players on his team. Very high-level talent. First-round draft picks. Heisman Trophy winners. But they've been kind of just an average team. Overrated at times. You think the defense is better, and it turns out they're not that great. You think your offense is really good. Yes, LSU's a really good team. I thought they were going to be a really good team this year, and I still believe that the talent is there, but it's Brian Kelly and that coaching staff that's going to mess it up. And that was the caveat that I gave at the beginning of the season. Yeah, LSU has a chance, to maybe push for a playoff run, push for a spot in the playoff, but the caveat is, will Brian Kelly and will that LSU coaching staff mess it up? And so far, I think you have to put that on them, because I think the talent is there. So, say LSU screws up, Brian Kelly screws up, and they pull the trigger on, hey, we're getting rid of Brian Kelly out of nowhere here in a few weeks or at the end of the regular season. That job is going to eclipse the Florida job, which is eclipsing your job. And what about Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri? I've heard him being named as a possible candidate at the Florida job. You know, he did say in an interview, I believe that was today, Wednesday, as I'm recording this, that no, they've had a discussion, you know, with his team, with his staff. He is a Missouri Tiger. He's not going anywhere. No shot. When you're a coach, that doesn't mean anything. I honestly would rather a coach say nothing than to lie, than to say something like that may turn out to be not true. And we've seen that before with coaches. I would never leave this place. There's not a chance in the world. I will never leave. You will have to carry me out of this building. You'll have to carry me out of this facility. You'll have to carry me out of this town in a pine box. Famous words for Tommy Tuberville, Ole Miss head coach before he, funny enough, talking about Auburn, left in the middle of the night to take the Auburn job. You can't always trust what a coach says. So, say Eli Drinkwitz gets named for one of these jobs, and say he takes one of those jobs. Well, now Missouri's open. If Lane Kiffin was to somehow leave Ole Miss comes open. That job right now looks a heck of a lot better than your job. A lot of people would argue that. What about Shane Beamer at South Carolina? Things are kind of on the downward trend for South Carolina. What happens with him? I think he's fine. I think he's all good. I put his seat at mild. South Carolina fans got all over me for that. They were like, no, Shane Beamer is our guy. His seat is as cold as, his rear end is frozen. His seat is so cold. And now I want to know if those South Carolina fans still feel the same way. And if you're a South Carolina fan and you're listening, how do you feel about your coach now versus when you did at the end of last season when y'all were competing to try to get into the playoff? It's a bad time for Auburn. The carousel's huge this season. It's only going to get bigger. And honestly, yeah, I think you have. This could be one of those things, although I think it's gotten unacceptable to this point. Billy Napier got another chance. He didn't get fired last season. Maybe, in fact, I know that Florida fans would have preferred that he would have gone last season because maybe you would have Kiffin now. I think people think that there was a greater chance that Kiffin takes the Florida job last year than now. Maybe a lot of things are different. Last year you had Jackson Dart, you had all of your, these first round, second, third round draft picks, this NFL talent on your team that are all going away. And it was going to be a rebuild year coming up. Among other factors, maybe Florida thought that they could snatch him up. It's tougher now. I still don't think Kiffin goes there. But for Auburn, the question is, who do you get? Who wants that job? But if my prediction is true, and if Auburn wins this game, Hugh Freeze is out. Where does Hugh Freeze land? I don't know. He probably ends up back in the group of 6 somewhere and just goes from there. But, I mean, I hate it for Hugh, but that's just is what it is. And I mentioned Brian Kelly a minute ago. Well, how about this game versus Texas A&M? This game, Texas A&M is at the top of the SEC right now. And what do they rank? Third. LSU is 20. Now, all these rankings are going to mean nothing when the college football playoff rankings come in here not too long from now. So, what is the updated line? Texas A&M is favored by 2.5. This game, imagine that, a 6:30 p.m. Central kickoff time down in Baton Rouge. Imagine that. So, Brian Kelly can save his job by winning this game. I think he can give himself a little bit more time because, you know, I said this earlier, and I've said this many a time. Garrett Nussmeier, I'm still holding on to the belief that he is a pretty good quarterback and that he can put the team on his back and maybe make something happen. Look, they got whooped all up and down the field versus Ole Miss just a few weeks ago, offense and defense. This is the redemption game. You have a chance to beat the team that's number 3 in the country, the highest rated SEC team, the team that is on top of the SEC standings right now. A team that, with Mike Elko, that is already leaps and bounds better than Jimbo Fisher ever was there. And Texas A&M has a weaker schedule, but this is not a gimme game. I don't care. Everybody's like, well, LSU's this great team, and then, they have a couple bad performances. They lose a couple games. Everybody's like, oh, they're overrated as hell. Well, which one is it? Are they overrated, or is the competition just too tough? Which one is it? Now, I understand that there's a lot of problems that was supposed to be fixed that wasn't. But look, you got beat by a really good Vanderbilt team. That Vanderbilt team turned out to be underrated. Ole Miss, they're rated about the same as now as they was then. Even with that loss to Georgia, this is the overrated, underrated game. If you're gonna say somebody's overrated or somebody's underrated, explain why. Tell me why they are overrated or underrated. Use some critical thinking here. LSU is rated about right. They're not overrated. They're not underrated. Honestly, they may be a little bit underrated at this point because, they still have that dastardly environment, that difficult environment down there in Baton Rouge, and Texas A&M, this is going to be one of their big tests. And I don't care what you say. Texas A&M, yes, they have a weaker schedule, like I mentioned. Like Tennessee's got a weaker schedule. That's how they squeaked into the playoff last season. Not a bad team, but they benefited from, other people losing and them, getting good wins at the right time towards the end of the season that really pushed them up into the playoff picture. But if we look at Texas A&M and what their road has looked like, they have a couple sort of shaky games early. They beat Notre Dame, remember, 41-40. They're at Notre Dame, pouring rain. They got it done. That was an amazing game, amazing triumph. You win, and that's all that matters. They whoop Mississippi State. They whoop Florida. And yeah, they beat Arkansas by 3 points, but that is a Bobby Petrino coached Arkansas team. You've got Missouri next. If you're Texas A&M, you get past LSU, you got Missouri, which is ranked above LSU, and I don't know if they may be a little bit overrated. South Carolina, Samford, and then Texas to end the year. So Texas A&M is in one of the best spots that you can be in, because they're undefeated right now, and they can lose 2 games. Texas A&M, even with their resume here, the teams that they've played and the teams that they have yet to play, which are going to be a couple of ranked matchups, they still have a chance to get to the playoff with 2 losses. No, you don't go to the SEC, but with those 2 losses, you can still get into the playoff. But for LSU, man, the road is a lot tougher. I mean, you can't afford to lose again. You're already 5-2. You have Texas A&M at home. Texas A&M is hot. Number 3 team in the country. You got to go to Alabama next week, and that's already slated to be a 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern start. It's already going to be a night game in Tuscaloosa. Then you've got a Bobby Petrino coached Arkansas team coming to town. And then you end the season in Norman, Oklahoma. Brian Kelly could save his job. Similar thing to Hugh Freeze. Although I think the fuse isn't quite as short for Brian Kelly. But if he goes to losing 2 or 3 more of these games, I think they're firing him. And I don't know if they're firing him if they lose to Texas A&M, then lose to Alabama and go 5-4 at that point. I don't know if they don't fire him then. Because LSU is one of those teams, one of those coaches, one of those programs that does not tolerate losing. And that's just how it is. So, but who am I picking to win this game? You know, it's tough. It's tough to go to the Swamp. And it's tough to play LSU. Texas A&M's got a pretty good, well-rounded team. And I think I actually lean LSU in this one. I think they can pull it out. Honestly, I don't think Brian Kelly has any other option. And I hate saying that because I think it's so silly to say, well, so-and-so is not going to want to lose this game, so they're not going to lose it. Like, that doesn't mean anything. So I might lean LSU, and I might take LSU on this one. But I can also see Texas A&M beating LSU by 10 points. And the experiment with Brian Kelly is going to be over soon. And the LSU job is going to be open. And no offense to all you Florida people out there, all you Florida Gator fans, but if the LSU job comes open, there's one guy that I think would favor that over your job. And that is that LSU position. That is that LSU job. If Brian Kelly gets fired and you're Auburn, you're LSU, you are pissed. Because you're trying to better yourself. You're trying to get ahead of the game. You're trying to fire your coach, get him out of the way so we can get the good guy. And then LSU decides, they step up into the picture and they say, we're firing our coach, Brian Kelly. Get me the best candidate out there. And they could get anybody they want because LSU, no doubt, is, I don't even think you can argue this, that is a top job. Other than Alabama, other than maybe Texas now. Maybe Texas would be pretty lucrative because of the brand. And Georgia, LSU is right there in those 4. And obviously Georgia, Alabama, Texas is not going to come open anytime soon. LSU will that is the top job. And then you could say it may be Florida under that, and then Auburn. And if you want to throw Penn State in there, Penn State somewhere between the Florida and Auburn spot. So the candidate would obviously be Lane Kiffin, as it is for Florida. Again, I say I don't think Lane Kiffin's leaving Ole Miss. I don't think he's leaving now. Now, do I think Lane Kiffin's not going to see? This is the thing that kind of is silly on on college football Twitter. The thing from Florida fans is like, well, do you really expect him to stay there at Ole Miss? You really expect him to just keep coaching there and retire there one day, and he's going to be like 20 plus years? No. And I don't think any Ole Miss fan believes that. However, I think he's going to be there for reasonable amount of time. He's already been there longer than he's been at any other job in his life. I think he's going to, honestly, my thought is, I think the only other position he would take the Alabama job. If Kalen DeBoer decides to leave, or he gets fired one of these days, and that's even hard to imagine there at Alabama, but it could happen. And, if that does happen, I think that's the job for Kiffin. And I think a lot of people think that too. But maybe what is more of a likely scenario is that Kiffin goes back to the NFL and gets his second shot in the pros. And that very well could be true. And then that would be where he ends his career, considering that everything goes well. He may do one of those things, one of those Nick Saban type moves where he leaves Ole Miss, goes to the NFL for a little while, and then he comes back to coach Alabama and carries in the footsteps of Nick Saban. Now that would be pretty cool, because a lot of people compare Kiffin just like people compare some of the other coaches that have worked under Saban, like Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart a little bit different. You could say maybe a Steve Sarkisian. Out of all the coaches, in my opinion, I think Kiffin is the most like him just in his demeanor. No, they are not similar in their interests. They're not similar in exactly the way that they handle everything. Their temperament, for example, and certain other things. And certainly off the field, how they carry themselves is very different. But they're similar in a lot of ways. In coaching, Kiffin is a great coach, and that's why he's been. And this was it's the Kiffin tax, and I've seen that thrown around here, the Kiffin tax, because that you're a program like Ole Miss, and you're not a bad program. You're an SEC school. You're an SEC program. But if you have a really good coach and you have success, the tax is your coach, and it's been Kiffin ever since he took that job. Your coach is going to be named in every coaching search every single season, every year, and that's just how it's going to be. That means you have success. So it's the tax of that success that you've had under this head coach is why everybody else wants them. And you should be proud of that. But since we're talking about Kiffin and we're talking about Ole Miss is traveling to Norman, Oklahoma on this Saturday. Oklahoma's 4.5-point favorite. Now, Ole Miss is in a position right now. They did a lot of good work early in the season to get past some of the hurdles that derailed them early. Last year, they got beat by Kentucky. Shocking loss to Kentucky. They lost to LSU in overtime. So you already had your 2 losses, and you knew that like there's no way you're going to make the playoff with 3 losses. You beat Georgia at home, but then you fall to Florida in the swamp, and you just ruin your chances at going to the playoff, even with a first-round quarterback that's lighting it up at the Giants, with the New York Giants, and several other guys that were NFL caliber talent and are playing on Sunday now. Everything was together. But now, this season, going back to the coaching thing about you having a really good coach down there in Oxford, the fact that he took a rebuild team, a team not as good, not as much talent, a Division II quarterback in Trinidad Chambliss that he plucked straight out of Ferris State, and he's lighting it up, lighting SEC defenses up. That is coaching. To take a worse team, and at this point, they're doing better than they did last year. That is a Nick Saban thing. Nick Saban goes up there after winning a national title. Well, you shouldn't expect that much this season. We're in a rebuild year. We're rebuilding. We're trying to get back to where we was last season before we lost, all those guys to the first round. And then they win another national title the next season, stuff like that, which is kind of ironic. When Nick Saban says he's in a rebuild year, because Alabama always had talent, second string talent that was as good as most schools' first string. That's just how it is. Same thing at Georgia, stockpiling talent, which you don't see near as much now in this new era, but it still happens. The greatest players are still going to go to, the big schools. Even though there's a lot more parity there, and you got the money and the NIL and all those things, there's still going to be a greater collection of your blue chippers that are going to go to those big schools just because they want to go. Because the big schools have the money, but it's also the brand. It's all the things that revolve around that. Ole Miss is in an incredible position right now. Yes, if 1 or 2 plays go different last week versus Georgia, you win that game in Athens, and oh my goodness, you're set. You screwed up though, but because of that good work you did early in the season, now you can afford to screw up at Georgia, and you've given yourself an opportunity to have one more screw up. I think Oklahoma is a good team. Yeah, they got whooped by Texas. Oklahoma and John Mateer, man, and Brent Venables have put together a pretty heck of a season. Really, redeeming themselves for a shaky start. When they entered the SEC, they got left in the dust by Texas. They're redeeming themselves now. John Mateer, man, like a Heisman contender. Yeah, he got banged up. He got hurt. He had that surgery. It's kind of been a little shaky. Maybe he came back a little too soon. Not really sure. And that's still an ongoing thing. How is that going to affect him going forward? Is he going to be 100%? Is he going to continue to be that Heisman contender that he was, earlier in the season? They got whooped by Texas in the Red River rivalry, Red River shootout, whatever name you would prefer to call that game. They got whooped by Texas. They got embarrassed by Arch Manning in the average Texas team, I would say. But sometimes, and this goes for both of these teams, sometimes when you're humbled, that can be the best thing for you. Now, last year, you could say, well, Brandon, that didn't happen to Ole Miss last year because they got beat by Kentucky and they still, they still lost 2 more games. They lost to a bad but upwards trending Florida team, and they lost in the swamp. You can accept that one, right? Yeah, but see, you lost to 2 teams you shouldn't have lost to last season. LSU, that was one of the 2. LSU and Georgia were 2 of the games that you could pencil in. Okay, I could see them losing those 2 games. You beat Georgia, but you lost to LSU. In no way, shape, or form should you have lost to the worst team in the SEC last season, other than Mississippi State, Kentucky. Kentucky was saved from being last because Mississippi State was so terrible. You hate to say you had a good loss, but Ole Miss had a great performance. Yes, the defense got humbled. They got ran all over. They looked like they were going at half speed at times, not putting in 100% effort. If they get that 4th down stop in that 3rd quarter, Ole Miss goes down and they score another touchdown, and Ole Miss pulls away, and it's just enough to where Kirby Smart and that Georgia offense can't produce another, because Georgia scored on every possession other than the final drive. You shake the game up a little bit. If that defense can get that stop, you have a little bit of momentum. Maybe they can get another stop. Maybe Kirby Smart's and that Georgia offense that was so dominant, behind Gunnar Stockton and that amazing performance he put up. Maybe a few things go Ole Miss's way even later in the game after that. Momentum swings this way and that way. Nevertheless, it didn't happen, but Ole Miss had a good loss. Was Oklahoma's loss as good as Ole Miss's? I don't think so. You got humbled in a rivalry game. That's good for both of these teams. I'm leaning Ole Miss, though. I'm leaning Ole Miss to squeak by and cover. And if you're Ole Miss, the path to the playoff is smooth as butter if you win this game, because you can still afford to screw up one more time. If Ole Miss wins on Saturday, they'll be, 7-1? And who do they have left? They got South Carolina at home. They've got the Citadel. They've got Florida at home. And then they travel down the road to Starkville for the Egg Bowl. And we're talking about a South Carolina team that is on the downward trend. That's not what they was this time last season. You got a Florida team that is going to have an interim coach. They don't even have a coach at the moment. They're going to have an interim coach, here pretty soon, though. They're probably going to be working on that in this bye week. So you'll be dealing with an interim coach. And I don't see them putting up like Bobby Petrino type performances, like almost beating 2 really good teams. I don't see that happening. And then Mississippi State, who maybe Jeff Lebby will have figured some things out by then, but I doubt it. You're good enough to score points and to stop Mississippi State, even though that, maybe your defense has been shaky at times. So it's one of 2 things. Ole Miss loses on Saturday, and it's kind of tough the rest of the year. Or Ole Miss wins on Saturday, and they don't lose again. And you go 11-1 in a rebuild year with a Division II Ferris State transfer quarterback in Trinidad Chambliss at the helm. That's Coach of the Year type territory right there. The difference, because I have seen some headlines talking about this game and talking about I want to get the wrestling term correct here. Was it the irresistible force versus the immovable object? Is that what it's been? Talking about Ole Miss's offense and Oklahoma's defense. So, but I wonder the other direction. Can Ole Miss's defense revert back to like the performance that they had versus LSU? And can they stop John Mateer and the Oklahoma offense? That's going to be the question. Now, Oklahoma's offense is not at all what Georgia's is. They're averaging 379 yards per game. That's 74th in FBS. 249 yards per game is 52nd. And 129 yards per game, that's 98th in FBS. Scoring, they're averaging 28.7 points per game, which is 70th. All right. For Ole Miss's offense, 492 yards per game. That's number 8 in FBS. That's 304 yards per game, which is 8th. 187 yards per game, which is 41st. And they're averaging 37.4 points per game. That is 16th in all of FBS. But here's the thing. Oklahoma's defense, allowing only 213 yards per game, which is number 1 in all of FBS. Passing, 132.6 yards per game, which is 4th. Rushing, only allowing 80 yards per game, which is 4th. And what is this? Averaging, only allowing 9.4 points per game, which is 2nd in FBS. That is, when you look at the Ole Miss offensive stats and you look at Oklahoma's defensive stats, that headline that I mentioned a moment ago does ring true. Now, for Ole Miss's defense, they're allowing 362 yards per game, which is 66th in FBS. That's 195.6 yards per game passing allowed, 38th. 166.7 yards per game rushing, that's 99th in FBS. And they're allowing about 22.6 average points per game, which is 52nd in FBS. Another stat here. Ole Miss is ranks 14th in FBS in third down percentages, converting 51.7% of the time. So, oh boy, that was a lot. So if Ole Miss, and I know that Pete Golding, I still trust Pete Golding. I know a lot of people have, given him a lot of flack. I remember defending him 2 years ago when he came into Oxford and that Ole Miss defense was terrible. And I remember saying, you can only do so much with a talent discrepancy. Scheme can only go so far. When the talent's not there, especially in the SEC, you can only do so much. And I have defended him with some of those same sentiments. But also I remember that he's been the defensive coordinator for, going on 3 years, right? 3 years? You shouldn't have had this big of a step back. And maybe that was just one bad game against a really, 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 really good team. Maybe that was an outlier. But the scheme, I don't think, was good in the Georgia game. And I don't think the 11 guys out there were the best 11 guys. And that may be controversial. It may not be. But that's just my perception and others' perception that I've talked about that just watch football, that just love watching football, have said the similar things. So Pete Golding is being the highest paid coordinator at what is he making, $2 or $3 million? It's inexcusable to have that kind of performance. So a lot of pressure is on him and that Ole Miss defense to redeem themselves from last week and actually I believe that if your defense is playing well, your defense can, you don't want to wear down one side of the ball by being bad on the other side of the ball. And that can go both ways. You want your defense to be able to sustain drives, but you also want your defense to be able to, stop the offense. I don't know if your defense can really wear down another offense, but you have to make stops. And I don't just mean preventing touchdowns in lieu of like field goals. I mean making stops, making turnovers. If Ole Miss's defense can stop Oklahoma's offense, I think Ole Miss's offense will have enough of a chance to score enough points to exceed whatever Oklahoma can do. This is going to be a lower scoring game. We're talking about in the 20s, I think. Maybe 30s. I'm thinking 20s probably. But I'm picking Ole Miss to win. And they're going to go on and they could win out or they can screw up and lose another game. I just know that Ole Miss literally is in charge of their own destiny. And they're number 8 in the country. And actually, I see it right now. Oklahoma is actually favored by 5.5. I just got an updated line on that game. Another fun game is Missouri and Vanderbilt, and I'm picking Vanderbilt at home in Nashville. Game day is going to be in town. I'm picking Vanderbilt to win that game as well as their... Oh, my gosh. Vanderbilt is number 10 in the country. Do you believe that? I mean, we're talking about possible playoff for Vanderbilt. I said Mississippi State has a good chance to scare Texas. I don't know if they're going to beat Texas, but they're going to give them a scare. Something funny about Arch Manning, I think, he is a Manning, and Mississippi State fans have a certain disdain for that name. However, I think because Arch Manning didn't go to Ole Miss, that he went to Texas, I think they probably view him a lot more favorably, kind of like with Peyton. So that's kind of a little caveat there. But, again, the most intriguing thing is that Florida opening. And I don't know what happens. And there's a lot of season left. And like I said before, the candidates for this position still have a lot of time left. And the thing is going to get more and more toxic. And I just hope that for Ole Miss's sake, that we don't have another 2022 Auburn situation where you get distracted, your team gets distracted, and you end up losing a whole bunch of games after starting really, really hot. And it doesn't matter what Kiffin says. He's asked about it. He said, well, we don't talk about this stuff. We're focused. We got a lot of, we got a top 15 matchup. We're traveling to Oklahoma. We got this big matchup. And we got a really good opportunity to do some great things. And we don't talk about it, and it's not brought up. Well, yeah, that all may be true, but your players are like, 18 to 22, 18 to 23-year-old, guys that have a device and have access to the internet and see all the things all the slop that you and I see when we go to Twitter, when we go to Instagram, when we go to Facebook, when we go to YouTube and go to all those things. When we turn on the TV to ESPN or the SEC network or something like that, we see all the slop that those players are going to see. Those Florida fans that are atting, they're tagging these players in post. And all this stuff and all this, this external noise, those players are getting a dose of all that, regardless if you're talking about it or not. And I just hope that, for Ole Miss's sake, that doesn't happen. And they continue and they have a really good year. You cannot look at next year. Even if Kiffin leaves, do not look at next season, because you have an incredible opportunity to go to the playoff and have that. You can hang that banner up forever. We made it to the playoff in 2025, 2026. Even if Kiffin leaves last year, after the season, next year, and he's gone, whatever. Next year is a new coach. You still have that milestone. You still have all those wins. You still have all that success. No reason to throw this year away because of what may happen next season. That's all I'm saying. But another great week ahead of us here, week 9, college football. And as the coaching carousel continues to spin, if some major things happen or some more developments happen or any other things that I think is worthy of getting behind this microphone, behind this camera to talk about, we'll talk about it between now and Saturday. But it's college football, y'all. Stay tuned for any developments. And as always, enjoy yourself, have fun, be safe, enjoy some great college football. My name's Brandon Taylor, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace.